She's talking at dinner. He's nodding, eating slowly, saying almost nothing. And somewhere in the last few minutes, she started to wonder if she's losing him. It isn't an argument. He isn't cold. He hasn't done anything dramatic. He's just quiet, the way he's been quiet more and more lately. She reads it the way most people read silence. Something is wrong. He's checked out. He's unhappy. Maybe he's unhappy with her. But across the table, inside his own head, something very different is happening. For the first time in years, he isn't performing. He isn't managing the room. He's just here. Two people at the same table, hearing the same silence, and building two completely different stories from it. If you're a man past 50 who's been with someone a long time, you probably know this scene from the inside. You didn't get quieter because you stopped caring. You didn't wake up one morning and decide to become mysterious, distant, or impossible to read. Somewhere along the way, you simply ran out of the need to narrate your own life out loud. Early on, you told her everything. The small frustrations, the office politics, the strange things someone said at lunch, the opinion you had not fully formed yet, but needed to hear in the air before you understood it. Talking was how you processed the world, and for a long time, she was the person you processed it with. Then life changed. The storms got familiar. The old worries repeated themselves. The work stories stopped feeling worth the effort. You learned which thoughts needed to be spoken and which ones would pass if you gave them 5 minutes. So the talking got smaller, not because the marriage went cold, because you no longer needed every thought to have a witness. And here's the part that catches men off guard. She can feel the silence. She just can't always feel what's inside it. For a lot of men, talking was never only about connection. It was also regulation. You talked through the workday to drain the stress of it. You talked through decisions because saying them out loud helped you make them. You explained the problem, argued with it, made a joke about it, and by the end of the story, you felt a little less full. The words were doing a job. As men get older, that job often changes. There are fewer battles to prove yourself in, fewer people to impress, fewer situations where you need to explain who you are. You have already learned, sometimes the hard way, which arguments are worth entering and which ones are just noise wearing a good suit. So the processing still happens. It just happens quietly, inside, before it ever reaches your mouth. The problem is that silence is not neutral in a relationship. To the person sitting across from you, silence always means something. It can mean comfort. It can mean tiredness. It can mean peace. It can mean resentment. It can mean nothing at all. But if you never mark it, if you never give it a name, the other person has to guess. And people usually guess from fear, not from facts. That is where good marriages get into trouble. Not because one person became cruel, because one person found peace in silence, while the other started hearing distance inside the same quiet. Same room, same dinner, same marriage, two different readings. And this is where couples split onto two paths. On the first path, the silence goes unexplained. And unexplained silence is where a relationship's imagination does its worst work. She fills the gap with a story. He's bored of me. He's hiding something. He's already halfway gone. He, meanwhile, has no idea a story's even being written. He thinks the evening is peaceful. He thinks they are sitting together in the kind of quiet that only long history can create. He may even feel closer than he did when he was younger, because he no longer feels the need to fill every inch of air. But she is experiencing that same silence as a slow withdrawal. Over months, that gap between his intention and her interpretation can do more damage than an actual argument. At least an argument tells both people where the pain is. Silence lets both people imagine it. On the second path, someone names it. Not with a long speech, not with a dramatic confession at midnight, with one honest sentence. I'm not pulling away, I'm just quieter than I used to be, and it's not about you. That single sentence can change the entire meaning of every quiet dinner that follows. Because now the silence has a label. Not rejection, peace. Not disappearance, rest. The men who get this right don't suddenly become talkative. That is not the point. A quiet man pretending to be loud usually fools no one and exhausts himself in the process. What they do is smaller and harder. They learn to mark the silence instead of just living inside it. A hand on hers across the table with no speech attached. And "I'm good, just thinking," when he catches her watching him with that worried look. Telling her once, clearly, outside the heat of any moment, that his quiet is not a verdict on the relationship. It is just what peace looks like on him now. That matters, because love after 50 is not always louder. Sometimes it becomes more practical. It becomes making sure the car has gas before she drives somewhere. It becomes noticing the porch light is out. It becomes sitting in the same room while she reads, not needing to interrupt the peace just to prove you are present. But the stronger men also understand the danger in that. They know that quiet love still has to be findable. Quiet doesn't have to mean unavailable. A man can be a man of few words and still reach for her hand first. He can still ask about her day and actually listen to the answer. He can still turn away from the television when something in her voice changes. He can still show up fully in the 10 minutes that matter, even if he no longer performs presence for the other 23 hours. That is the difference. He does not need to talk all evening, but when he does speak, she should be able to feel that he is still in the room with her. The goal was never to become louder. The goal was to make sure his silence, over time, reads as safety instead of distance. But there is a real line here, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. Sometimes the quiet is not peace. Sometimes it is distance. Sometimes two people have genuinely drifted, and one of them calls it maturity because that is easier to say out loud than the truth. Peaceful silence and empty silence can look almost identical from across the same dinner table. The test is not how little you're saying. The test is what happens in the moments when you choose to speak. Does the eye contact still land? Is there still warmth on the other side of the quiet, or just habit? Do you still notice her? Do you still reach for her? Do you still care what kind of day she had, even if you no longer need to give a full report on yours? If a man goes quiet and stops reaching, stops noticing, stops being curious, that is not peace. That is checked out, wearing peace as a disguise. And a man owes it to both of them to know, honestly, which one he is in. So back to that dinner table. She's still talking. He's still quiet. But maybe now she knows something she didn't know at the start. And maybe now, so does he. Silence in a marriage that is still alive is not always the absence of connection. Sometimes it is what connection sounds like after it stops needing to prove itself every 5 minutes. He isn't always pulling away. Sometimes he is finally, after all these years, still. But if he wants her to understand that, he may have to give the silence one sentence she can hold on to. "I'm here. I'm just quiet. And it's not about you." If this landed, tell me in the comments. Does your partner understand your silence? Or do you still need to have that conversation? Subscribe for more of this every week. And if it helped, a like helps another quiet man find it too.